All right, so for anybody that would like to see it, this is going to be a recording of the Chapter 2 test review. We'll start out here with problem number 1. In these first 4, we're simply solving an equation. So we take a look at number 1, we want to get x by itself. That's how we solve equations. We get variables by themselves. So we want to get x by itself. The first thing we have to do is take care of this positive 8 that's over here. Well, to take care of that positive 8, we have to subtract 8 from both sides. Whenever we do that, those will cancel. On the left-hand side, we have 25 equals x, and we're done with that problem. One-step equation. On number 2, we're going to have negative 10 minus b equals negative 29. Well, again, like the last problem, we want to get b by itself this time. So first, I've got to get rid of this entire 10. I add 10 to both sides. Those will cancel. What I'm left with is negative b equals a negative 19. All right. When I divide each side by negative 1, I get b equals 19. That is a b. You stop and say, wait, why did I divide by negative 1? Well, this negative sign in front of the b right here, this negative sign is actually attached to this b by multiplication. Okay? So to undo that multiplication, we have to divide. That's the opposite of multiplication is division. Number 3, our very first step is we actually have like terms on our 5 and on our x's. So we have a 5x minus a 6x. And what that gives us when we combine them is a negative x equals negative 3. The other side didn't change. And then again, like in the last problem, and I'll change colors, our final step is to divide by negative 1 and divide by negative 1. That cancels out our negative signs right here and here. And what we're left with is x equals 3. For number 4 is a bit more intensive. There's a lot going on. Before we can start moving variables around and changing stuff around, we have to free up this stuff that is inside our parentheses. To free it up, we have to distribute this negative 2 inside our parentheses. What that gives us is a negative 6a for our first multiplication, and then minus 12 for our second multiplication. The rest of the problem did not change. And there we go. Now we're ready to start moving stuff around. You can do this in a lot of different orders. I like to add 6a to both sides first because I know that that is going to end up giving me a positive amount of a's on the right-hand side. In the same exact step, but in a different color, I know I'm going to end up with all my a's on the right-hand side because these are going to cancel. So I know I want all my numbers on the other side. So I'm going to add 28 to both sides. And as you'll see, these are going to cancel. So now all I've got left on the right-hand side are my a's, and all I've got left on the left-hand side are my numbers. Specifically, those are 16 equals 2a. And then when we divide each side by 2, those will cancel, and we get that 8 equals a. Oops, sorry. Equals a. And remember, as just a side note, you can check all of these answers, okay? So if I wanted to go into my calculator and check this answer, I'd go back to my little start screen. Reopen that. I go back to my start screen right here, my blank screen. And I can enter in this entire left side of the equation into my calculator, but instead of a, I'll plug in that number 8. So that would be negative 2, open my parentheses, 3 times 8 plus 6, and then we will close our parentheses off and see what it gets. Negative 60. Now we enter in the other side, negative 28 minus 4 times 8. And we're hoping to get negative 60, and we do. So 8 being A is the correct answer. You can check all of these. Number 5 says draw a graph for each inequality. Well, when I know that my variable is on the left-hand side, when it's on the left-hand side, I can trust the arrow. Okay, what that means is I go over here to -1. I know I need a filled in dot because this has an or equal to sign. So I give myself a filled in dot, and then whichever way that arrow pointed, I shade that direction. For number 6, again, I'm going to the point where it tells me to, -2, and I'm going to do a filled in dot because it has an or equal to sign. But this time my variable's on the right-hand side. When my variable's on the right-hand side, I know this arrow is lying to me. So I've got to go the opposite of what it says. This arrow is pointing to the left, so if I want to go to the opposite side, I shade to the right. That's because the variable's on the wrong side, okay? Variable's on the wrong side. Number 7, before we can graph this, we have to solve this inequality. To solve it, what I want to do is I want to divide each side by 2 so that I get my a by itself. So I divide by 2, divide by 2. I get that a is less than 29. A is less than 29. And so I go over here on my chart. This time I need an open dot because it's not or equal to. And then because my variable's on the left, I can trust my arrow. If my variable's on the right, my arrow is lying to me, but my variable is on the left-hand side over here. So I know that I can trust this arrow and shade that direction. Okay? Similar problem on number 8. I have 264 is less than or equal to -22x. And this is where we first run into that little rule about dividing and multiplying by negative numbers. Okay? So, again, my very first step, these -22 and this x are connected by multiplication. How I undo multiplication is with division. Divide by -22, divide by -22. Those cancel, okay? All that I have left on the right-hand side is that x. What happens is that sign in the middle actually is going to flip because we are dividing by a negative number. And I believe over here on the left-hand side, we should have 12. Yep, 12. Perfect. But it's a -12. -12. Okay? Should be -12. To graph that, we find 12 on our number line, do a solid dot, -12, do a solid dot, and then this time our x is on the right-hand side. That means we have to do the opposite of this arrow. In other words, I'm going to shade left. Okay? Shade left. For number 9, our first step is we have to distribute this -4 inside. What that gives me is a -4x plus 16 is less than, just less than, -20. All right? For my next step, I've got to get x by itself, and that starts with subtracting 16 from both sides. We're always doing that subtraction first, okay, or addition. We're always getting rid of that first. What we have is -4x is less than -36, and then we're dividing each side by -4. Those are going to cancel. I'm going to be left with as a final answer of x, and what's careful to notice is that this sign switched, okay? Because we divided by a negative number. Anytime you divide or multiply by a negative number, your sign switches in the middle. And what we're going to be left with is a +9. So I go over here. This time it's an open dot because it's not or equal to. And our x is on the left-hand side, so we can trust the arrow and we can shade. Okay? So our very last problem, number 10, we will get to on our very next recording.